Thanks for listening to Uncle Sam's Soccer Podcast, keeping you up to date with the latest in American soccer. And don't forget to subscribe.
Good day to everybody, and welcome to this edition of Uncle Sam's Soccer Podcast. I'm Steven Jotter, and on the line with us is Armand Kafai down in Texas and assistant producer Jake Watroba in Minnesota. We got the game back together, and we're going to be talking about MLS Attendance. Steve Brisendine is going to join us to talk about the red-hot Sporting Kansas City, and James Grossi, we had him on multiple times now, talk about TFC and the Champions League. Can they turn around and make history for MLS and U.S. soccer? But boys, what's going on?
Nothing much. Kind of just living life, you know, watching a bunch of soccer here and there, trying to not pass out after studying like 5-6 hours for exams. So it's a hard knocks life, Jake. I mean, I don't know about you, but
yeah, no, it definitely is a hard knock life up here. I'm just watching the Sounders put on a clinic on Minnesota United right now. So as is any MLS team wants to do with Minnesota United. So they're really, you know, that respect thing they were talking about a few weeks ago. They've really these last 3 matches. Whatever it was, they've really done a great. Well, Armand last week and I guess I can blame him for this performance right now for jinxing them, basically saying they're a great team. I don't know why no one respects them, but no, like it was a few weeks ago when Francisco Calvo came out and said no one respects us, and why don't we get the same amount of respect as Atlanta and LAFC and New York City and all this stuff? Well, this is why, Francisco Calvo. This is why they look terrible today. Granted, I could sound like an idiot in 24 hours if they come back and win 3-2 or something, but after one half, they look terrible. So that's what I'm doing. That's my misery right now.
Did any of you guys get ESPN Plus?
I did.
Did you,
I
Steven?
have not.
Well, let me tell you something. I've had the app. I got the subscription, the 1-year subscription, and you have to give a big shout out to USL for probably doing one of the smartest things and partnering with ESPN Plus, because I've watched more USL games with ESPN Plus than I have in my life. And the reason is because it's so accessible. Instead of on that live YouTube, like I don't know, it just didn't feel like a real game that I was watching. But now that's on ESPN Plus, like it's on my phone. If I'm working out or something, I need to go on a treadmill, or I'll pull up I was watching the Tulsa Roughnecks and Fresno play, and there was like a couple red cards thrown in there. I mean, I just want to say USL and ESPN Plus in general has been great, and USL did a fantastic job partnering up with ESPN Plus because it's definitely going to help the exposure of their league. Jake, I think you were watching a couple of USL games earlier, like in the last couple of weeks, right?
Yeah, I was watching. What was it last week? I think it was Indy 11 versus Nashville.
Oh, and that terrible turf.
Oh yeah, I know that was really bad. You think like that was about on the same level as New England Revolution when the Patriots are playing.
No, it's even it's even worse because the New England Revolution, at least Gillette Stadium, attempts to take all the paint off. Indy 11 had one end zone.
Yeah,
like with the Colts thing on, and then the other side. Well, it was just so wacky looking.
Well, yeah, and it was awkward too because they didn't even remove the Indianapolis Colts. They tried to at least their helmet at the 50-yard line. But the thing is, how the field was set up was you would think that would have been kind of centered in the middle of the pitch, but it wasn't. It was all kind of off-centered, so it looked kind of goofy. And then, like you said, the one end of the field had the Indianapolis Colts end zone still completely there. Just we're not going to try to hide it or anything, which is fine, I guess. I don't know. They're playing in the Colts stadium, so whatever. But no, I getting back to ESPN Plus. Yeah, there's something about it that it just makes it more accessible than having to look up USL on YouTube, which really isn't that hard either. But I guess when you're just looking to because the nice thing about ESPN Plus is the MLS package too. So when you're looking to watch soccer and you don't want to one of these random MLS games, like, oh, there's this USL game on, or there might be this English Championship game on too. So yeah, it's all right there at your fingertips, and it just makes everything so much easier for you.
I think it's great exposure for the sport in general, but let me ask you guys, since I don't have ESPN Plus, and I probably will get it over the summer, how has the product been regarding USL?
Just in terms of like the games?
The games.
I mean, you could tell it's a step down. It's from MLS. I mean, it's still been entertaining to me, but sometimes you get these. I remember I watched an MLS game a couple years back. It was a bland 0-0 draw. I was on Unimos with LA Galaxy playing against the Fire or something at StubHub, and I think you get a lot more of those games. Those weird bland, sometimes bland results, but it's really entertaining too because you do have a bunch of characters in the league, such as a Chelis at the Las Vegas Lights, and I mean, I think like the first 3 games I tuned in, there was like it was like some sort of like it was like either goal fest or something along the lines of that. It's really interesting because it's a step down, but I mean, I don't know about you, Jake. I mean, it's still entertaining in my eyes.
Yeah, I mean, not to be that guy, but we're all MLS fans here. We all kind of recognize where MLS stands in the pecking order of leagues around the world. So to me, it's watching USL, it is what it is. It doesn't. I guess the drop off in quality or talent. I mean, you can tell it's there, but I don't think it's something where you go, oh, I can't watch this. This is like watching high school soccer. I mean, there's still good players in USL. There's still guys in USL that I think could be playing. I mean, I don't know, starting for MLS clubs, but could be, decent, role players on an MLS side. So
you are right. And Paul Kennedy tweeted out, this was Saturday. He tweeted out top 10 announced U.S. soccer crowd so far this week. 7 came from MLS, 2 from USL, and 1 NWSL. Notable, a preseason NPSL soccer game in Chattanooga draws 5,000. What's insane is that the third highest attended game was FC Cincinnati versus Pittsburgh in the USL. It's just weird to assume look at these numbers and to assume that MLS is doing really well. FC Dallas only got 13,326.
I hate to throw an excuse, but the weather over here was not that good.
Oh, the weather wasn't good? Okay.
It was supposed to storm all the game, and it actually did end up raining for, I'd say, a 30, 40-minute part of the first half. I mean, no excuse, because, they have struggled with attendance, but they just had really bad luck with
that game.
Weather. Yeah, with that game, it was bad luck.
But even so...
Can I ask a question real quick, though?
Yeah.
How does MLS do their attendance? Is it tickets sold, or is it actually...
Tickets sold.
People going through the gate. Is it okay? Just making sure, because I know baseball does it kind of weird. But carry on. Sorry.
But the LA Galaxy versus Atlanta United, 25,000. Well, closer to 26,000. Orlando City, San Jose, 25,000. Sporting KC versus Vancouver, 19. Red Bulls versus Chicago, about 18. RSL versus Colorado, that's 17.5. Do you think we have an issue with the attendance? Because when you look at the 2018 MLS attendance average, this is you can go find this on soccerstadiumdigest.com. Let's throw out DC United because they're going to get a new stadium. But the Crew, they're averaging less than 10,000. That's the Columbus Crew.
Are in a weird spot, though. Like, think about it. They're in a really weird spot, and I used to think the same. But then you think about it. Do you want to support a guy that wants to move your team? It's kind of one of these things where you're kind of torn. Do you want to go support those guys who are threatening to move your team by giving them more money, or do you want to go support the team even though there's a chance they might move? They're stuck in this weird. They don't know exactly what to do. The thing is, the Crew are a pretty good team. So it kind of sucks that they're in this
pretty good
dilemma.
But I mean, it doesn't help the argument that, look, we're getting less than 10,000 a game. Like, how does Precourt not sit there and go, look, like, what else do you want from me? They're not showing up. I'm getting the hell out of here. This is not good for the club. But what's that say to the players when they look up in the stands and it's empty? I mean, does it not affect the players when they are looking to sign for clubs here, those European players, say, even the older players, but just, you know, they're looking around and, wow, you know, playing for Sporting KC in front of the stadium and in front of fans like that versus Colorado Rapids. Why the hell would I ever go to Colorado?
It's tough because for certain instances you see people talk about, okay, yeah, the fans do help. Like, I mean, I think it was Atlanta. Someone mentioned they're excited to play in front of the Atlanta fan base. But I mean, I think in some instances, just what's best for the player, what's best in terms of monetary value and whatnot. Especially, you know, if it's a player from a low, like, you know, from maybe a little bit more of an unknown player. I mean, obviously, I don't think fans have that much of an impact. But I do see what you're saying. I think it doesn't really hurt, but it can really help, if that makes any sense.
No, it definitely can help. But, Jake, you follow baseball a bit more closely than I do. I sent you this article this past week on Yahoo Sports, 10 degrees, MLB's enormous attendance drop due to bad weather, or is it something far worse for baseball? And numbers across the board are down. Now, the article is from Jeff Patson. He writes, compared to last season at this juncture, the Boston Red Sox are down 2,500 fans a game. The Chicago Cubs and St. Louis Cardinals are nearly 5,000. The Cleveland Indians' average crowd has dropped more than 5,000. Texas Rangers, more than 7,000. The Pittsburgh Pirates, more than 7,500. The Toronto Blue Jays, Detroit Tigers, and Kansas City Royals are each in the 8,000 range. The Miami Marlins are pushing close to 10,000. The most severe is the Baltimore Orioles, who've played 6 games at home and are at almost 16,000 fewer per. This is huge. Now, do you think this is an issue of American sports, or is MLS's attendance issue not as bad as we think, and is in fact in a better situation than you look at MLB? Now, we are in the month of April, and the weather is not very good in these, you know, in Boston, in these colder weather cities, so it would make sense, but these numbers don't look good for baseball. What does that say about MLS and U.S. soccer?
Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of tough to explain, because I know, like, with baseball, I think a lot of this, and I'm not sure if this was touched in that article too, but a lot of those teams you mentioned are tanking, and that's kind of been a hot topic in baseball now, where these teams are basically, like the Marlins in particular, with their, you know, had a fire sale this past off season. So I mean, I don't know if this is an American sports trend now, where people are kind of just. Let's face it. I mean, I don't know how the prices are for FC Dallas games. I don't know, you know, what the most expensive ticket is, or, you know, whatever. But I mean, you go to a game, if you're a family of 4, you know, you bring, you know, the 2 kids, the wife or whatever, or the husband. You know, I think you're spending probably $100 altogether on those tickets. Then you got to buy food and drink and parking and all that stuff. It's just an expensive outing, and you know, the ticket prices aren't getting cheaper. They're getting more and more expensive as, you know, time goes on. I know Minnesota United's, theirs are going up for the 2019 season already, and you know, I think stuff like that is what kills some of these attendance numbers sometimes. And it's April too. Again, this was a really weird March and April with how much snow and how cold it was.
No, you're right. But
in the U.S.
But my point here is, if you go back to the Soccer Digest, SoccerStadiumDigest.com, look at the MLS attendance. They look at the year-to-year average, and they give you, has it increased from last year? Every team from 14 straight down to 22, so that includes RSL, the Red Bulls, the Union, the Fire, FC Dallas, Colorado Rapids, the Revolution, the Crew, and DC United, have had less attendance this year than last year. And that
doesn't surprise me, though.
That is last year's average. So that includes the good games and the good weather. And this, we're only including April for this section. But those teams, those markets are struggling to get asses in seats.
Well, and I think with some of those teams too, I mean, and you can speak to this because Dallas is was in that list of clubs you just mentioned. I mean, how many times have we complained on this show about how Dallas doesn't market well, and they don't do enough to get people into stands, or into the stands, and New England Revolution are a great example too of they're a team that's playing 45 minutes outside of Boston. That's kind of a pain, what to get to. So, I mean, another thing too about those teams you listed off, those aren't really good teams.
Armand. Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong, Jake, but Armand, do you think this is an issue that could plague the league in separating the good and the bad? I mean, like Jake said, but what's another interesting is these are all pretty, besides for the Union, these are all older market teams. Chicago, Dallas, Colorado, Revolution, Columbus, DC. These are original clubs.
It's really tough to gauge if there's a attendance issue or not yet, because if you look at a lot of teams share that same characteristic. Red Bulls, their stadium is more in Harrison. Dallas stadium is
not in Dallas.
Is not in Dallas. It's in Frisco. And you could probably go on and on.
Denver, New England, those stadiums are definitely not in.
And there you go.
Chicago too. That's not in. It's outside of Chicago.
And there you go. That's part of the problem. But again, another part of the problem is I don't think people care about MLS.
That's what we were talking with some sources this past week, and they were saying the biggest issue. And these are sources close to front offices across MLS. We were talking to them, and they were saying, well, the issue is it's not necessarily the marketing. Some people just don't care. It's the question.
Exactly. People will go. I mean, in Texas, contrary to what anyone says or whatever, you drive everywhere. So if you really care about going to see an MLS game, you will drive the 30 to 45 minutes to get there. People do it for the Cowboys all the time. Now, Cowboys, FC Dallas, kind of a rash comparison. When one's America's team, the other one is bottom in MLS attendance. But
Jake,
you have to care about it.
In Minnesota, do they care? Where's the stadium in relative to the city? Do people want to make that drive? Is it accessible?
Right now, so they're playing at TCF Bank Stadium, which is on the University of Minnesota campus. That's in Minneapolis. So there is, I don't know about bus routes because I don't ever take the bus, but there literally is a train station about 50 feet outside of the stadium. So if you're taking the train to get to the game, it drops you right off in front of it. That's obviously easy. It makes it much more accessible. When they move to Allianz Field next year, there is a train station that will drop fans off a block from the stadium. So, Minnesota draws pretty well too. I think they average about 19,000 fans per game. I don't know if it's tough to say, like, in this marketplace, if people actually care about the club or if there's just
Jake, the number is 2,500. That's what you're averaging over the two games that you guys have played at home. 20,000. Which is
20,000.
Which is literally the exact same that you guys got last year. So it's a 0-0 year to year.
Here's the thing. Minnesota has soccer history. I mean, if you go back to the Kicks were in the NASL, the old NASL in the late 60s or 70s. They were averaging 24, 25,000 week in and week out. I mean, that's not a lot of people know about the soccer history in Minnesota. Minnesota is, I think, a really strong soccer market. I mean, you see it in some games in TCF, even when it's cold as hell outside. people are still showing up because they care.
Yeah, and the team is already getting pressured to expand Allianz Field already, and it's not even near completion. Yeah.
No, but expand how?
Well, it's only going to have, I think it's 18,000 seats, 19,000 seats, somewhere around there.
There's no way it's that little.
It's 19,000. No, Jake's right.
No, it's less than 20,000. I know that, but they're already getting pressured to expand to 25,000. So,
I'm surprised that they are creating stadiums that are capped at below 20. I'm surprised they don't try to make a field, the stadium 20 to 30,000 to allow that era of growth.
Yeah, but it's kind of one of those things where, here's a great example. So if you turn on an MLS game and you see the stadium's half full, do you really want to watch it?
Well, that's a great point. I mean, and
it's like Red Bulls, because Red Bulls is capacity 25,000, but they maybe get 12,000. It looks half empty.
No, you're right, and it's a huge issue. It makes the appearance, but I'm asking. Let's look at FC Cincinnati versus Pittsburgh, and how they were the third most attended game Saturday.
Here's my thing about that. Sorry to interrupt you, Steven. I'm so sorry to interrupt you. But here's my thing about that, and a lot of people have mentioned this. They're still a USL team. Don't forget that. Those ticket prices probably aren't as high as MLS prices. I want to see what it's going to be like, and hopefully it doesn't change that much. Hopefully they've established so much of a loyalty and a fan base that it won't jump. But that's still a USL. I bet you a USL ticket's much less than an MLS ticket. So plain and simple.
Well, sure, but the point here is Zlatan Ibrahimovic visits Dallas next week. Tickets have gone through the roof.
2 weeks.
2 weeks. Next home game, I should say.
Yeah.
Next home game. Tickets are through the roof to buy. Buddy's calling me.
They've had to. They've opened up seating where the Hall of Fame is being built. The two corners that haven't been open usually, they've opened them up, and they're selling like $75 tickets for like a sideline view, basically.
So it's ridiculous how a one player still affects. I think ultimately the growth of the league has trended well, but I think MLS attendance is still a worried concern for the front office of each club and MLS as a whole, because it's still dictated by the home team, if they are good, who's on the home team, and ultimately who's visiting. Because you can't have these fluctuations of being sold out and then averaging 50% of stadium capacity the following week because you're playing a team that blows and you're playing a team that, in LA Galaxy that might not necessarily be the best in the league, but because one player is going to sell out and everybody just wants to see him play.
No, yeah, I agree. It sucks. I mean, I tell people all the time who are just now watching some MLS matches because of Zlatan, LA Galaxy aren't that good of a team. You might be surprised if you see them lose and Zlatan not get that much service. They're like, no way.
Well, it just happened this past weekend.
It just happened, exactly. It just happened against Atlanta United. Atlanta United thinks a far better team to watch than LA Galaxy, but that's besides the point. Yeah, it does. But again, I think part of it is because people don't care. I mean, people don't care about MLS. People, especially younger people. I think younger people that I go to school with, I talk to week in, week out, they don't care about MLS. They say, "Why do you watch that garbage league?"
I don't know. That's a great question, and I think the problem is I'm in an area where there's really no MLS market. Jake, you see, I mean, do people talk about MLS up there when it comes to soccer? Yes or no in Minnesota?
Yeah, no, not really. They don't get talked about all that often. I'll sometimes wear like something Minnesota United, and people will ask me, "What is that? What team is that?"
Really?
I think I saw. I don't know what. The Minnesota Vikings wide receiver Adam Thielen posted on Twitter that he got season tickets to Minnesota United, and I was reading through the comments because I just want to see people say stupid stuff about soccer, how they don't like it or how it's dumb or whatever. And I remember there was a comment that said, "What is that? Is that like do we have like a lacrosse team? Is that what that is?" And it's like, and that's kind of where Minnesota United is with some people, though. It's just like no one knows who they are or what sport they represent or anything. And the team has done a lot better job marketing itself, but yeah, there's just not that many people that talk about it all that much. I mean,
they're
not talking on the radio or anything.
That's another issue is what the coverage is in the media. But it's an interesting conversation with the MLS attendance. I think the numbers are always intriguing to look at because it fluctuates, and it's like, you got to try to figure out what's the issue is. Why aren't asses being put in seats in some markets and some others are? But Jake, you're going to leave for the show. I'm going to leave you with this statistic. This is from OptaJack. Minnesota has conceded in 18 consecutive MLS games, which is tied for fourth longest such streak in MLS play since 2010. How's that make you feel?
Yeah, we're a little leaky, huh?
Once you guys get out of this stupid soft launch and go into the real launch, I think it'll be a much different story. But
I'm convinced they will drop money this summer. I think they will spend a
apparently Twelman mentioned on the halftime show that they had an offer from either a Liga MX side or a second division side in Mexico for Christian Ramirez, a $1.5 million offer, but they rejected it.
That was in the winter, which I'm willing to bet right now they are kicking themselves for not doing that.
Because he's benched behind Abu Delani, so I mean...
Yeah.
Up next, Steve Brisendine from Sporting KC. We'll talk to him. Talk about how good that club is. Alrighty, listeners, joining us right now is MLSsoccer.com contributor Steve Brisendine. Steve, how are you doing this afternoon?
Doing well, how's everybody there?
We're here. We are enjoying MLS. It's been crazy. This past weekend, if you look at the score lines, those criticisms that MLS is boring, please, there were goals left and right. And a team that really
goals galore.
Yes, goals galore. And a team that really likes to score is Sporting Kansas City. This was not expected from this club, was it?
Well, no, after scoring, 40 goals in all of last season, and Vermees did make it pretty clear that he wanted to go out and find somebody who was going to put the ball in the net. After they averaged so few goals per game last year. I don't know if anybody could have seen what's going on this year coming, though. I mean, 28 goals, half of last season's total just as far into the season. This club has really been fun to watch in the attacking third.
What do you make of Johnny Russell's production, Steve? Because when they signed him from Derby, people were it was kind of talked about, but not really. But I mean, he's exploded onto the scene. I mean, that goal against the Galaxy a couple weeks back was really impressive, and his performance against Vancouver, scoring that hat trick, was also equally as impressive.
Well, it's not just the way that he's scoring; it's the way that he's moving off the ball. It's the way that he's drawing penalties, the way he's running at people. And he earned so many team weight points the other night when he came 50 yards across the pitch to get up in Watson's grill after the foul on Espinoza, and then he kept his head about him, kept his hands below neck level, and wound up getting two of Vancouver's guys get sent off in the ensuing fracas. So he's been a contributor in so many different ways. And yeah, I think he's been one of the bigger surprises of MLS this year, one of the bigger pleasant surprises, just because of so many different things that he does well, and how good he has been at really helping invigorate that attack.
Was Sporting? I mean, I talked about it in our little preseason little video series that we did. That Sporting KC needed to score, but the defense has been somewhat leaky. What's going on compared to last season? Is it the loss of Benny Feilhaber to LAFC that is missing?
I don't know. I think what's going on here is they're still kind of getting used to playing a more stretched game, for one thing. And the other thing is when teams are not coming into Children's Mercy Park and sitting back the way they used to. Sometimes it was easier to get clean sheets at Children's Mercy Park because the opposing team would just sit back and look for counters. I think you're seeing across the league a more wide open style of play, which means that there are going to be more goals scored on solid defenses this year than in years past, just because things are a lot more wide open. The other thing, I think they're still getting used to the model of play that Vermees installed this year with more risk-taking. more emphasis on going down and going after the goal instead of looking around for the perfect pass and slowing the game down a little bit that way. I think the pieces are still there for the defense. I think, they have 3 shutouts so far this year, including shutting out LA Galaxy with Zlatan in the team. That's not an easy thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the defense is getting to where it needs to be. I don't think it's going to be a liability this year for sure. I think it's still going to be a strength. I think it's just a different kind of model of play. It's going to be more wide open. Might concede more, but they're also pouring in a lot more.
Steve, what do you make of Kyrie Shelton's play recently? I mean, we saw him at NYCFC, the team that selected him in the Super Draft, and we saw flashes of what he could do, but it looks like he's been playing really well in Peter Vermes' system.
What he's done really well is being really aware of the guys around him. Look, I know he's not been lighting up the score sheet. He's not down the net yet. But you look at, say for example, there's a play in Colorado where he screens off his defender so Felipe can get to the rebound and knock it in. There's that little back heel that he makes in that same game to Diego Rubio. He's doing really well at being aware of the guys around him and helping create opportunities for them. I think Peter will say that as long as the ball, he expects goals from forward, but as long as that forward is helping create opportunities to go in the net, I think he's going to have a pretty long leash with Peter, even if he's not putting the ball in the net because of how well he's working with the guys around him.
Steve, Sporting KC has played the most games so far. Now, give or take, because there are a couple games going on today. I don't know how that affects the standings. But how has that affected the team, and how do you think this could impact going into the summer with the World Cup and just having a schedule that seems to be very busy here early on?
In the past, I've kind of gone in late in the year with games at hand and not done a whole lot with those. It'd be interesting to see I don't know what to expect with having the schedule more front-loaded like this. I do know they're getting results, and that's never a bad thing to get results earlier in the season because then maybe you can weather that stretch that's coming where the results aren't going to come. I think this is a team, though, that is actually better built than the Spring Kansas City team has been in a while to make runs not only in another Open Cup, but runs in the playoffs. And I think it's built with more depth. I think it's built to more the system rather than who's out on the pitch at any given time is really sort of the star. I think that the people to make that work perhaps better top to bottom.
Steve, there's been a little bit of some criticism for SKC's new DP, Johan Crozet. He's kind of found himself in the last couple of games, I'd say. What's been the fan reaction of his play?
Early on, I think you're right. There's a lot of criticism because with the DP, people expect the DP to come in and contribute right away, which, in a playmaking capacity, that's not always the easiest thing to do because you're still learning everybody's tendencies. You're still learning the league. I think his work rate has been really good, and I think the results are starting to come around to match with that. Is he as good as he needs to be yet? I don't know. I think he's making a lot of strides, and I think he's hitting, starting to hit those points where they expect him to make the plays and to link up with his teammates. And I think that's just a natural progression. The fans are going to take a little bit to warm to him. One, because Benny was such a favorite, and they miss him, and anybody's going to be compared to him for a while. But I think Jose has a chance to win people over, and I think he's starting to really kind of come around and mesh better with the team in the last couple of matches.
You guys, Sporting KC has scored the most goals through 8 games in its franchise with 20 goals, which is just an insane stat to think about. I mean, obviously the trend, will it keep up? But do you see them continuing just being an offensive juggernaut throughout the season with how Peter Vermes has everything set up in this beginning part?
until people figure out, if they can figure out that off the ball movement in the area and the attacking third. And I think so. This team is. If you look at past Sporting KC teams, there was possession with not so much intent, or not so much to show for the possession. A lot of extra passes near the goal. Maybe when a shot should have been taken and it got laid off to somebody, or an extra touch trying to get an angle to shoot from. This team is looking, I think, to make things happen sooner rather than later. They're not looking for the perfect shot. They're taking their opportunities and letting things kind of shake out as they will from taking the shots. I mean, look at Jimmy Madraga the other night. That was a shot that.
Ooh, I was going to ask you about that.
Seriously audacious shot.
What'd you think of that goal? I was going to ask you about that. Ooh. That angle from behind, it's beautiful.
Yeah, as for me, they've been doing any kind of mechanical work with Jimmy to get him to keep the ball down, because in the past, he's got 2 really nice goals this year. In the past, he put the ball over the bar pretty routinely. I mean, he's just sitting back too far on his shot, not getting over it well enough, maybe getting a little big-eyed sometimes. But this year, for whatever reason, and Peter said, no, it's just, kind of his maturing. Whatever reason, whether they actually have been working with him or whether it's just, learning to settle down a little bit and get over the ball, he is getting deadly from distance. And, he's never been shy about shooting, but this year, he's a lot more dangerous because that ball is dipping, it's swirling, and it's staying under the bar and going in the
net. Steve, I just want to talk about the league quickly. Obviously, Zlatan Ibrahimovic has been playing for a little bit. Just get your thoughts. Good move for just the league as a whole?
Oh, boy. This is a complex thing because it does sort of reinforce the image of MLS as a place that guys, who are getting up there in years, who've been making 7 figures in euros, and they're coming here now. There's a little bit of that left. I'm gonna be honest with that. With that Zlatan signing, there's still a little bit of that whiff of that around him. Now, will he be good for the league from a publicity standpoint? Oh yeah. The guy's personality is crazy, and he can still play. He can still play at a pretty decent level. He's not who he used to be, but that's when you get to be that age. Nobody's who they used to be. Overall, look, I think it's good, but it's not an unmixed blessing, because there is a sort of reinforcement of, okay, well, I'm getting where my Premier League club doesn't have much use for anymore. I'm going to go to MLS and grace them with my presence. but in terms of attention to the league, in terms of personality, sure, it's a great thing.
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely.
It's been fun. Just to watch him play.
Yeah,
and he's visiting Dallas, and Armand and I are just talking. The ticket, increases in prices are just astronomical just because of one player. It's just crazy.
Yeah, and he's done some big courses. His second goal on his debut was offside. I was still maintaining that one. That first goal was just a thing of wonder, but that second goal he was offside on. So I'm going to go back and hang my hat on that. But then you look at a guy who's had more impact. I think, arguably look at Johnny Russell, look at Felipe Gutierrez. These are guys who know not near the splash, but look what kind of impact they've had for Sporting and where Sporting is on the table.
No, yeah, absolutely. Even with the consistently underrated Ilie in the midfield as well. These guys are guys that people don't really talk about, but as when they come together and as a collective, they've made SKC a team that I have kept my eye on outside of the NYCFCs and the Atlanta Uniteds of the world.
Look, Ilie, if you're going from a purely objective standpoint of the impact he's had on a team and the value he's brought to the team, Ilie may be one of the best signings ever in this league. But the defensive midfield position is just so non-sexy.
Absolutely.
A D-mid is like it's like a server in a restaurant. You don't really notice them until you need them.
All right.
And then they show up, they do what you need them to do, and then they go back to being, invisible. I don't say invisible, but you just don't notice them as much. You look at the way Ilie plays. He's where he needs to be. He's not flashy, but he's just so heady, and he's he's got such a great idea of pace. You know, he can speed up a game if he needs to. He can slow down a game if he needs to. The guy can control the tempo of a game. Great link up between the back line and the attacking core. But he's a lot like Tim Milligan. He's never going to toot his own horn.
Right.
We got two of the most of the guys with the smallest egos making huge contributions to this club. And I still think Ilya, if you from a purely objective value for dollars in this league, he's been one of the best signings ever.
Whenever I see Ilya play, because I mean sometimes I'll catch an SKC game on ESPN Plus now, or back in the day MLS Live. He's someone who's just right most of the time. He's just right. He makes the right play at the right time, but it's such a small play that if you're like a casual fan, you won't notice it. But it's just something that's so small. You're like, damn, that was just such a smart, intelligent play, and it's something that, like I think, is criminally underrated and just not a sexy position.
He's a footballer's footballer. I mean, yeah, if you're a casual fan, you might not notice, but the guy's a footballer's footballer. The people who know the game, the people who play the game, know what a good pickup he's been for Sporting. And it's just he is underrated. I want to say outside the circle. Inside the circle, I mean, he's rated really highly. It's just that, again, like you said, that's not a position where people go to get famous.
Well, Steve, we appreciate it as always. We look forward to reading your stuff, but tell the listeners where they can follow you on Twitter and get all your latest information on Sporting KC.
Follow me at Steve Brisendine on Twitter, just my name. Doing not so much game-to-game stuff, but some longer-term stuff this year, but I was still going to have my stuff out with MLS Soccer, so it's always fun to follow this club, and especially this season, it's going to be really fun to follow this club.
Oh, for sure. We're excited to see where Sporting KC go. Thanks again, Steve, and have a good day.
Thank you, Steve.
Thanks again for having me on.
I think Sporting KC can be a dark horse because the team is sexy among MLS fans, but it's not as sexy as an Atlanta or an NYCFC, LAFC in terms of where the team could go throughout the course of the season.
Man, SKC is one sexy team in my book.
Well, it's sexy, sure, but it's not.
I see what you're saying.
It's not
star
the
power.
It's not the star power. It's not the sexiness that you're getting with TFC, Atlanta, NYCFC.
No, I agree. I absolutely agree. And
regardless if they're good or bad, if they're good teams or bad teams.
Exactly. It's kind of like, I would even say like Dallas, 2 years ago when they had 60 points.
Super sexy team.
Yeah, super sexy team, but no one cared because they didn't have like any superstars. No, I just, man, this discussion of Ilya Sanchez is really interesting because he is a really criminally underrated defensive midfielder, which, again, a defensive midfielder does a great job, doesn't really get that notice. But like you said, the defensive struggles are something that may need to be touched upon. Hopefully they can get that balance because defensively, I mean, they allowed 4 goals against Chicago?
Yeah, something like that.
Like their first or second game this season? It was 4. It was 4. It was a big amount. And, I mean, part of that is, I mean, I don't think there's not that many upgrades done to the defense just yet, but I mean, I think if maybe there's a couple upgrades here or there and they shore up the back line, that they can easily be a team that competes with a team like an NYCFC or an Atlanta. Hell, they might be better than one of those teams. We just haven't seen them in a head-to-head game yet.
Yeah, and we'll see how the season progresses. I mean, it's still early on, so you don't know. You just really don't. That's the nature of MLS because a team could get hot. Seattle 2016 and go,
Sorry.
Win everything. But turning the page, Armand, to Toronto FC, who clearly are not giving two poops about MLS. That is absolutely not their intentions. Right now, it is the CONCACAF Champions League, and they laid an egg last Tuesday.
They messed up, and they know it. It's one of those games that you just watch, and I was frustrated watching that game as someone who was hoping TFC would win, but still a little bit more on the biased side. That was one of those games you watch, and I feel like I've watched 5 of those games because those are all the same way FC Dallas games would play out.
You know what?
Those
types of games are what proves that soccer. In this game, you just don't know what's ever going to happen. You could have all the talent in the world, but sometimes it just doesn't click. You could be the more superior team. It doesn't click. That's the beauty of the sport.
I mean, what did I say on Twitter when the game ended? That TFC probably should have been up 3-4-1 at some point.
We were messaging back and forth. I think. Well, we're waiting to get James Grossi on the line here, but I think Vanny screwed up his tactics. He should have switched them up earlier in that game because they were all over Chivas.
They were, and it was a really frustrating game to watch because, like I said, they should have been up 3-4-0. Chivas was giving them so much space. They were just whipping in balls like crazy. They were giving them so much space on the wings, and the fact of the matter is they didn't take advantage of it. They didn't score. And now they're looking at a 2-1 deficit, needing 2 goals to win the CCL, basically. And look, they were the better team, but who cares? Throw it out the window. They lost. They lost in a bad way. And they allowed a couple of bad goals. It is what it is. Joining us again is what I like to call our TFC guru, James Grossi. James, how you doing today?
No, not too bad. Enjoying a bit of a lazy Sunday, watching some soccer. You know how it goes.
Yeah, no. But 1 week ago, we were looking at the historic moment TFC had before them. We were all head over heels thinking that TFC could do it. And then game comes around, and then things don't go to plan, do they?
No, it was that elation, that sort of excitement that everyone had going into BMO Field on Tuesday didn't last very long whatsoever. 66 seconds in, Chivas sort of scores off of a goal that no coach ever wants to see the team concede, and it sort of deflated the stadium, and I'm sure it deflated the players a little bit as well. But they fought back and made it an interesting game. Of course, the result wasn't exactly what they would have wanted either, but it sure sets up an exciting second leg on Wednesday.
Do you think it's over?
That was.
Let's just get straight to the point. Is it over? Because Armand definitely thinks it's over. We've been texting literally since the game, and Armand, in fact, was pissed. He felt cheated by TFC.
I was bummed. I mean, maybe it was a little premature to say it was over, but that was one of the more frustrating games I think I've watched, because I would say they dominated for 65 minutes of the match, and then there was a 10-minute start in the first half, and then the last 15 minutes where they kind of were on the back edge, and you almost thought Chivas could potentially get a third. It was just like overall frustrating game, and the fact that they've done it before, getting that 2-goal deficit. But we've seen Chivas in the way they've have shut down. They prevented Red Bull from scoring goal, even though they could have scored. But I think Almeida knows what to do and how to limit Toronto. So I'm a little bit more bleak looking into the return leg in Guadalajara.
Yeah, to be straightforward, I don't think in any way this game is over. One of the things that really struck me afterwards was that Vanny was very terse in his press conference. He didn't really have a whole lot to say, and there was a part of me that got the feeling that he was very angry with how that match turned out. Not only that first goal was one that a coach never wants to see his side concede, but that second one too was just, to give it up on that sort of stage and sort of put yourself behind the 8 ball. But furthermore to that, it was a real missed opportunity to put a stranglehold on the series. Chivas were missing 3 starters through suspension. I think they were missing another player or two through injury, and you're playing at home, and whether you're the favorites or not, you really want to go down to Mexico having given yourself the best chance at finishing this off. Now, that said, this is a Toronto team that's very confident in themselves. And the thing that struck me post-match was, aside from Vanny being a little less verbose than he normally is, was that when we spoke to Michael Bradley and we spoke to Drew Moore, neither one of them was feeling sorry for themselves. Neither one of them was letting their head drops. That were letting their heads drop. They were very much adamant that this was halftime in the series, and yes, they had not taken from the home leg what they wanted to do, but there were still 90 minutes left to play, and they were quite certain that although they've given themselves a mountain to climb, if there's any team in MLS history that could do it, it's probably this Toronto FC team.
Yeah, I mean, one thing from this CONCACAF Champions League, TFC have scored in Mexico, so it's not like they can't do that. So that's a huge advantage for them. But I got a feeling watching the end of the game, the last 10 minutes, TFC, at least on the field, started to play a little too desperate rather than trying to really go at Chivas they had done for majority of the game. Do you expect Vanny to switch something up going into the second leg?
It was a very strange game, and as you said, Toronto dominated about 65 minutes of it, and by right they should have scored a couple more goals. Take expected goals, take expected goals for what they are, and Toronto should have scored at least one more, maybe two. And this is a team that creates a lot of chances. Sometimes they're not as efficient with them as they would like to be, but I think you can take the fact that they did create so many against a Chivas team that is supposed to be so defensively sublime as a good omen going into this second leg. The other thing that was kind of weird about it, aside from how it sort of played out, was that this was a Toronto team that seemed a little bit sluggish on the night. They seemed a little bit imprecise, and my theory on why that is because so many key players were carrying yellow cards that Michael Bradley had to think that extra little bit before he decided if he could go in for a tackle. Jonathan Osorio had to be that extra little bit cautious. Drew Moore had to have that extra little worry in the back of his mind, and Sebastian Jovinko and Josie Altidore were both at risk of missing that final. And so I think that really left a cloud sort of over the team, because there's one thing that you don't want, and that's to make a mistake in this leg. That means you missed the second leg.
Right.
And so having navigated that, they go into this final leg, and this was something I asked Greg when we talked to him on Thursday, was, there's a refreshing clarity about this that the club hasn't had for the last couple of months in this Champions League. Normally you're sort of doing the permutations in your head, and you're trying to figure out, okay, if they score this, then we need to score that. If we score this, then they need to do that. And the job is very clear for Toronto right now. They go down to Mexico, and they need to win by 2 goals. 2-0 is a perfect result for them. Chivas scores first. They need 2 goals to send it to penalty kicks. So, there's a very clear path to turning this over. Of course, Chivas gets some of their guys back, and who knows how it's going to play out. And as we've seen, they've been a very, very sturdy side defensively. But this is a Toronto team, and I think I've mentioned this before with you guys, that over the last couple of years they've gotten through 11 of these 2-legged series, and not always pretty, and sometimes you need away goals, and sometimes it doesn't play out the way that it is. But to get through 11 of these in a row is a pretty fantastic record.
James, I gotta ask you, was it more of Chivas's play, or was it more of just Toronto not finishing opportunities? Because I've gone kind of back and forth on this, and at first I was like, man, Chivas really, maybe they looked like they were pretty sharp with their strategy. But I mean, the more I looked at it, the more opportunities I thought Toronto had, especially I would say towards the end of the first half, especially on those wings. They were getting plenty of opportunities and plenty of service in the box. They just weren't finishing those opportunities. So was it more of, you think, Chivas implementing a good game plan, or was it more of just Toronto just shooting themselves again in the foot and just not making use of those opportunities that they provide for themselves?
It's always a little bit of both. There's always what you manage to do and what the opponent manages to stop you from doing. And that period you were talking about, the sort of last 15 minutes, last 20 minutes of the first half, I think Josie had 2 really good looks from 10 yards out that he normally buries, and Sebastian Jovinko had another one as well that was pretty good. And in a competition like this, you just can't really afford to give those away. And that's not taking anything away from Chivas. They had a lot of guys that sort of stood on their heads. I'm not super familiar with Liga MX and Mexican football in general, but Salcido, the veteran defender that stepped in for their suspended captain, had apparently his best performance in years, and a goalkeeper that had played a handful of matches before comes in and makes 6 or 7 really key stops. And Toronto, if you speak to them, what they'll tell you is they're happy as long as they're creating the chances, because as long as you're creating the chances, then that means that your game plan is working, and then it just comes down to the finishing and being precise in those key moments. And aside from the yellow cards and aside from the sort of awkwardness of how Chivas plays the game, I think Toronto would be happy with how they performed, but they were missing that little bit of sharpness. And this is a long tournament. It's been I think that was their 11th game in the first 2 months of the season, which you add in all the travel and you add in all the altitude and you add in that they played on that ugly stadium out in the ugly pitch out in Montreal, and BMO Field has been a really heavy pitch, and then you're down in Mexico where the grass is much more accommodating to the way that they want to play. And there's been a lot of wear and tear. There's a lot of bumps and bruises on the guys, and this was just they were sort of due to have a bit of a slip up in the competition that they'd focused so much attention on. And one of the peculiar things about it was we were told heading into it, and we sort of had a glimpse in the other Champions League matches about how peculiar of a style Chivas comes at you at. But I've never seen sort of a 40-yard gap in between the back line and the midfield where there is just absolutely nobody in the center of the field. Greg Vanny even mentioned this, and he said that's just bizarre, because normally there's somebody who's tasked with sort of occupying that space, because you don't want to give that much up. And he broke it down into it was almost sort of a series of one-on-one battles, and that's what Chivas turned the game into. And in order to one of the things that he pointed out that I hadn't quite noticed was that what that requires from the Toronto players is you have to do everything at maximum speed, in the sense that not only do you have to be where you need to be to get the ball or to make yourself available for somebody else, but you need to be going full tilt in order to get away from the man who's marking you. And that is a heavy workload, and it asks a lot of guys. And if guys are feeling a little bit tired and they have that slight hesitation of the yellow cards that we mentioned before, then maybe being a little bit less precise than you would like to be is a natural consequence of that. But this second leg, they've gotten 90 minutes to have a look at what Chivas looks like and what that game is going to look like and what they can expect. And there's no reason for Chivas to do anything different in the second leg. They've got an advantage. This is kind of the way that they play, so it's not like they're going to come out and change it up with 90 minutes to go until the Club World Cup. But I'm pretty excited to see how this game plays out. It's been a pretty wild journey. If you look back, it started at the end of February with that ridiculous snow game in Colorado, and it's regardless of how it goes, it's been a pretty wild ride.
It has. Lastly, James, before we let you go, what do you expect the outcome to be?
That's a tough one, because there are so many ways that things can go. One of the things that some of my colleagues in the press box always laugh at me about is when they ask me how I think a game's going to go, I always tell them that the first goal is going to be really important. And when they laugh at that, when I laugh at that, the second one's going to be really important too. One of the unique things about this is that first goal, if Chivas scores first, Toronto still needs to get two.
Yeah.
To send it to a shootout, which sort of, aside from how dispiriting that would be to sort of give up a goal, it doesn't really change what you need to do. Whereas if Toronto scores first, then Chivas, do they have to change the way that they play? If that goal comes early, does the crowd sort of get on edge a little bit? And we haven't really seen how this Chivas side looks against a Toronto team when they're not in the driver's seat. Scoring that early goal in the first leg really sort of shaped how that match was going to look throughout. And even when Toronto managed to tie it up, I think you could say that Toronto had the better of the chances until that free kick sails in over Bono's head, and then Toronto sort of took some risks and threw caution into the wind, and the game really sort of opened up into an end-to-end sort of affair. So, that first goal and especially a second goal, should we see it, will be really interesting. I'm looking forward to seeing Toronto come out with an intent and a determination that maybe we haven't seen in a lot of these second legs in Mexico. When they went down to Tigres, you have the 3-1 lead and you have the 2-1 lead and you know exactly what you need to do. And when they went down to Club America, they sort of knew they would be up against it, and they grabbed that early goal, and then they just were able to sort of see out the rest of the match. And this is going to be a unique situation in this tournament where Toronto needs to go on the road in the second leg and get something from this match. And they're a very determined side, and I'm very curious to see how that looks. And so what do I think it's going to be? I have no idea. Greg Vanny said it would a 2-0 would be very nice, which I think most MLS watchers would agree would go a long way to making things interesting. But it's CONCACAF, so there's always got to be some twists and turns, and so I don't know, maybe something like let's go big. Let's say 3-1 for TFC. A little bit nervous, but a wild game and a memorable night for sure.
Absolutely.
Wow,
well,
that's a bold prediction. I like it.
A lot, yeah. Bold indeed. James, just tell the listeners where we can follow you and get your work. MLSsoccer.com, all that good stuff.
All right, we got a couple pieces coming out on MLS Soccer in the next few days, just covering some of the Victor Vasquez injury situation and what Toronto FC expects from Chivas and all that sort of stuff. And TFC 2 is I cover them for Waking the Red at SB Nation, and they're sort of it's an interesting follow. It's a curious case. There's always moves going on, and the club just signed a bunch of young players up to the first team, and so we'll have some pieces showing up there. And that's pretty much my focus for now. I'm kind of looking forward to getting back to the regular season. This has been such a bizarre 2 months of these midweek games and not paying attention to MLS as much as I'd like. So it'll be nice to have a little break and then get back into the regular grind of the weekly MLS.
Absolutely. Well, James, we appreciate it. Enjoy the game, and we'll see what happens.
Oh, yeah, it'll be a fun one. And anytime, boys. Thanks for having me on.
All right, that was James, our little TFC insider. It's always nice to get these guys who are around the club on. Love it. You get some great insight. Steve Brisendine, great insight in the Sporting KC. But, Armand, games Wednesday night, I have a hard time seeing TFC overcoming the deficit. It's not out of the world. We saw Roma do it against Barcelona. We saw Juventus 99% do it against Real Madrid. It's not impossible. The sport's crazy. What is a huge advantage for TFC, I think, in the mindset, it could be a huge disadvantage as well, but if Chivas score, it does not change anything. That is the huge advantage TFC have. So they could get a goal, and if Chivas respond, it doesn't change the fact that they still have to score another. TFC have to get to 2 goals no matter what.
No, they do, and it doesn't really change much. Like I said, I'm kind of bleak. I think Chivas knows how to close out a game, and we've seen them do it before. And I think Almeida.
Yep, and they're on this historical run of ending. I think it was 65 years of not winning a regional tournament.
Yeah, I mean, it's like a Cinderella story waiting to happen,
Yeah, but you could say that with TFC too. So they're both Cinderella stories. I don't think anybody expected what we saw last Tuesday, so I'm going to go with the hot and bold prediction that whatever we're going to see Wednesday, nobody's going to expect.
Oh, that's really hot. That's a really sexy pick right there.
Yeah.
I'm going to go... like I said, I thought TFC would blow out Chivas, and to be quite honest with you, they should have blown out Chivas, but again, it's their fault. They didn't capitalize on opportunities.
You think this is when it happens?
They won't blow them out. I'm going to go 2-1. It goes to penalties, and that's all I'm going to say.
All right. Follow us at Unc Sam Soccer Pod, Armand Kafai, Steven Jodderin, and then with Jake Watroba. Big shout out to Steve Brisendine and James Grossi for joining today's episode. Catch you on the flip side.